Why do students often start language study alive and full of energy, and yet many of them end up studying like zombies? Well, one reason is because left on their own, learners just often reach for these dead, boring study tools like grammar drills and word lists and test prep books. Now, these tools are not intrinsically bad, but our brains dislike the shape of this kind of information. So brains instead prefer story shape because story simulates survival. And brains are made, designed, evolved to solve survival problems. So in her book, Wired for Story, story expert Lisa Cron says this: opposable thumbs help us hold on, right? They help us survive. But stories tell us what to hold on to. They tell us how to survive. So the question is, how can we boost, how can we enliven, how can we animate language learning with story logic? Right? And specifically for this video, how can story logic raise grammar drills from the dead? My name is Joseph Poulshock, aka Dr. Shock. I have a PhD in linguistics from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Scotland is great. And I've got 25 years or more experience teaching English here in Japan, where I live and work. My recent research is about story logic, language teaching with story logic, and teaching language and communication with story logic. You can get my articles. There's a link in the description. They're actually, I think, pretty easy to read and well written, I hope. So if you check them out, I hope you like them. Let me know what you think about them. And in this video, again, I'm going to be talking about how story logic can help us raise grammar drills or grammar dialogues from the dead. To begin, let's just talk about what story logic is and how it animates learning. So first of all, a simple definition of story logic goes like this. It's character plus conflict plus attempted extrication. So you have a character who wants something, who has an object of desire, as the story logicians say. And in order to reach or get or obtain that object of desire, the character must face conflict, trouble, challenges, dangers, risks, struggles, and things like that. And in the end, there's this attempted extrication. The word extrication here is perfect. It means to pull out of trouble, right? So this is Gottschall's definition from his wonderful book, The Storytelling Animal. And I highly recommend that. So character plus conflict plus attempted extrication is our most basic definition of story logic. We can abstract that even more just by calling it problem, solution, and result architecture. The character faces a problem, looks for a solution, and gets a result. Problem, solution, result. And that's the shape of story logic. Right? So story logic makes learning more enjoyable and more memorable. That's what my research shows. Also, I highly recommend Kendall Haven's book, Story Proof, where he shows lots of information, lots of research, lots of data, lots of evidence to prove, to show that story logic enhances learning. All right, so let's animate some dialogues. So we'll start out with a little bit of background. This is Laird, and he's a big wave surfer, right? And so we're doing these simple side-by-side style dialogues. Side-by-side is probably the most famous grammar dialogue book out there, written by Molinsky and Bliss. Partners talking to each other, A and B. So A says, "What's he doing?" And B replies, "He's surfing." Now we want to open up a story loop. So wow, what's going to happen? So we open up a story loop because we're going to show another slide with Laird doing something else that finishes this little story. All right, so let's go. All right, A, what's she doing? She's flying. It looks dangerous. Wow, what's going to happen? Again, the story loop, right? What are they doing? They are fighting. Ooh, looks hard. Who's going to win? What's he doing? He's hunting. I wonder what's going to happen. So let's close the story loops. Let's go back to Laird, where he's surfing. What's happening? What's he doing? He's crashing. What's she doing? She's landing. What is he doing? He's winning. What's he doing? He's losing. And then the last slide, what's he doing? He's escaping. So I have a little bit of a twist at the end here, just to add a little bit of story logic to these simple dialogues. You can mix these story logical dialogues with more traditional ones if you want, but this is a basic example of how we can infuse traditional grammar dialogues with a simple story logic. right? Story logical dialogues are easy to make with AI. Here are the same dialogues that we just saw made with Google Gemini. And these are in a comic frame. You can set that up and make them pretty easily. Pretty cool. Right? So again, brains like story shape. Left on their own, learners are going to probably reach for dead, boring study tools, the grammar drills, the word list, the test prep. But we want to help them engage with story shape, right? Where the information that they work with, the information that they respond to has a character plus conflict plus attempted extrication shape to it, or a problem, solution, result, architecture. And with story shape, learning lasts and is more enjoyable, right? So story logic uses are endless, right? I've got examples with one-word stories. I've got examples where you have to take a boring reading and then the learners respond with a story logical response to make those boring readings more interesting. You can also take readings and make them more interesting by infusing them with story logic. So you can infuse nonfiction stories, nonfiction text with story logic to make them more engaging, more interesting, and more memorable and enjoyable. Language learning does not have to turn students into zombies. Story logic can change the shape of language learning. So click the link, readoasis.com/storylogic to get the free guide or sign up for the free webinar and start using story logic to add more life to language teaching and learning.